The wind carried the scent of dust and rain that morning, a whisper of change sweeping across the lonely plains. Mika Rosewell stood behind the old ranch house, her hands buried deep in bread dough, her breath slow and steady. She worked in silence, the rhythm of her kneading matching the soft thud of her heart. The dough rose beneath her palms, something alive in a world that often forgot how to breathe. Her mother-in-law's voice broke through the thin walls. "Don't you burn that bread again, girl. God knows why you're still here when you can't do a thing right." Mika didn't answer. She never did. Words had lost their shape in her mouth long ago, the day her husband fell from his horse, the day his debts buried her deeper than his body ever did. Since then, she lived in the quiet corners of the Rosewell ranch, cooking, cleaning, surviving. She had learned to live without kindness, but never without purpose. The bread in her hands was proof she could still make something rise, even in ruins. Outside, a lone rider approached, the sound of hooves echoing through the empty field. Mika wiped her hands, her pulse quickening. Visitors were rare out here. The horse slowed to a halt at the gate, and the man dismounted, tall, broad-shouldered, with the sun in his hair and the weariness of distance on his face. When he knocked, Edna Rosewell appeared first. "We're not a saloon," she barked. "What do you want?" The man removed his hat politely. "Name's Bidzil Hart. My mare needs water. Been riding since dawn. I'll pay if you've got some rope and feed to spare." "Paying or not, we've got nothing for strangers," Edna snapped. Mika appeared behind her, holding a tin cup of water. She offered it without a word. Bidzil's eyes met hers, calm, steady, kind in a way she had forgotten existed. "Thank you, miss," he said softly, taking the cup. The water reflected the sky, and for a fleeting second, she saw herself reflected there too. "Don't thank her," Edna said sharply. "She don't talk, she don't listen, and she ain't got much sense either." Mika lowered her gaze. Bidzil looked at her again, then at Edna. "Seems to me she's got plenty of sense. The world could use more folks who speak less and do more." He finished the water, set the cup down gently, and turned to go. But before leaving, he said quietly, "The bread smells fine. You've got a gift there." When his horse carried him down the long road, Mika found herself watching until the dust settled. No one had called her gift anything before. That night, she dreamed of voices that didn't hurt. Bidzil returned a week later, and again the week after that. Each time, he came with small trades, honey for bread, rope for butter. He spoke in that slow, thoughtful way of his, words made of patience. Mika listened as she cooked. His stories filled the air like the low hum of a lullaby. One evening, as the sun slipped low and red across the fields, he sat by the porch, hands rough with work, voice soft as dusk. "You bake like the land breathes," he said. Quiet, steady, sure. Her lips trembled, a ghost of a smile flickering. She whispered, barely audible, "Thank you." The sound startled her, the first word she'd spoken in months. Bidzil smiled, and in his smile, she saw something she hadn't known she missed, hope. But Edna saw it too, and her cruelty sharpened. "You think a man like that would waste time on a broken girl," she hissed one night. "He'll leave you like all the rest." Mika said nothing. But inside, the dough of defiance began to rise. The next time Bidzil came, Edna sneered from the doorway. "If you like the mute girl so much, why don't you take her? She ain't worth $1, but she'll cook for you." The silence that followed was long and heavy. Bidzil set his cup down slowly. His eyes didn't move from Mika's face. "I don't need a cook," he said. "I'd take her as my wife." The world tilted. The air went still. Mika's heart stumbled in her chest. Edna laughed, cruel and high. "A wife? She can't even speak right." "I don't want her to speak right," Bidzil said. "I just want her to be treated right." Mika couldn't breathe. The words felt too big for her to hold. She turned and fled, out past the barn, past the orchard, to the cottonwoods that bent over the creek like old guardians. There, she fell to her knees, the sound of her own heartbeat roaring in her ears. Bidzil found her at dawn. He didn't reach for her, didn't crowd her silence. He sat beside her, his presence steady as stone. Finally, she whispered, "I don't talk much, sir, but I can cook." He smiled, a small, knowing thing. "Then we'll eat well." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sorrow, but from the fragile mercy of being seen. When they returned to the house, smoke trailed from the kitchen. Edna's rage had turned to madness, a lamp kicked over, flames crawling up the walls. Mika froze, the heat searing her skin. Bidzil rushed forward, pulling her through the smoke, his hand firm on her wrist. They stumbled into the open field as the house groaned and fell inward, sparks painting the sky in gold and ruin. Mika stared as everything she had ever known burned to ash. And then, quietly, she began to cry, not from loss, but from the strange freedom that followed. Bidzil turned to her, voice gentle. You've got nothing tying you here now. Come with me. I'll build you a kitchen big enough for your silence to sound like music. She looked at him, truly looked, and nodded. The next morning, Dust Creek shimmered like glass under the new sun. Mika rode beside him, the wind tangling her hair. For the first time in years, she felt her body lighten, as if she'd left her grief behind in the ashes. Days turned to weeks. At Bidzil's ranch, she baked again, not out of duty, but joy. The smell of bread filled the rooms, mingling with the scent of pine and wild sage. He worked the fields, and she worked the kitchen, and at night they sat together under the porch light, saying little, needing less. Their love was not a fire, but an ember, slow, steady, enduring. One evening, Bidzil walked in with a simple wooden ring in his palm. Don't need church bells or fancy vows, he said softly. Just truth. Mika looked at the ring, then at him. The setting sun lit his face in bronze. Truth, she whispered. That I want to build a life with you. A quiet one, but ours. Her hands trembled as he slid the ring onto her finger. The gold caught the light like a promise. Their wedding took place under the cottonwoods, the same trees that had once witnessed her tears. Now they swayed with laughter. A few neighbors came, bringing food and music. Mika wore a dress of pale blue linen. Her hair smelled of flower and wind. When Bidzil took her hand, he said only, "You're home now." She smiled, a real, unguarded smile, and the world seemed to open. That night, the stars were brighter than she had ever seen. The house they built together was small, but full of warmth. She baked 3 loaves, one for the past, one for the present, and one for the days yet to come. As the bread rose, she stood by the window watching Bidzil mend a saddle outside. His shadow moved against the glow of lantern light, patient and sure. She realized then that love wasn't loud. It didn't need grand words or endless explanations. It lived in gestures, a shared meal, a repaired fence, a silence that didn't hurt anymore. When Bidzil came inside, he wrapped his arms around her from behind. You've been quiet all evening, he murmured. Mika turned, her voice soft but certain. I was listening. To the sound of everything finally right. He kissed her forehead. The smell of fresh bread filled the air, warm, sweet, alive. Outside, the wind carried their laughter across the open plain, mingling with the song of crickets and the low hum of the earth itself. And if anyone had passed the Hart Ranch that night, they might have seen a woman standing in the doorway, light spilling around her like grace, her silence not emptiness but peace. Sometimes, the West kept its promises in quiet ways. Sometimes, the strongest stories ended not with thunder, but with the sound of bread rising in the dark, and 2 hearts learning, at last, how to rest.